Good morning, everyone. It is the 21st of June, 2019. Goodness me. I've gone last century all of a sudden. Happy summer solstice and happy winter solstice for our friends in the south. It's story day. I've got two great stories to share from some of our followers today. But also, I want to talk a little bit about the solstice. So we're going to have a little... and what it means. I'm going to be very, very brief because I've got a lot of stories that I need to. Well, these are quite long stories, so let's jump into it, shall we? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the solstice and the long stone on the Isle of Wight. The long stone is there are two stones there. There's the long stone and a shorter one, which is sometimes called the altar. Excuse me. And they're at Motere. Now, the old people and the cunning folk still call it by its old name, which is the Motere, which means the speaker stone. It's said that many generations of rulers of the Isle of Wight were crowned there, and many courts were held there, and announcements, and many years the centre of magic for the island. It is a wonderful place to go visit. It is part stark landscape, part lush woodland, worth every minute. And if you can get there on the summer solstice or the winter solstice, I think you'll find it's a moving experience. In fact, many people will be going there this weekend to celebrate the solstice. And quite a few people have gone there this morning just to experience the sun rising. So, happy summer solstice to our friends in the north. Happy winter solstice for those in the south. And let's crack on, shall we? So our first story is by Folklore and Legends and Twitter handle at folkloreandleg. Obviously there'll be links. Sorry, I can't shake this blocked nose. Anyway, hi there, it's Chris here. Below is my story. I hope it's okay. Of course it's okay. Anyway, so here we go. It was getting on for midnight on a clear Friday night in Epping, Essex. During the late 90s, there were 4 of us in the car that night. Me, Chris, my then wife Nicola, and 2 friends, Ian and Elaine. We had been for a night out at a local bar. Nothing too crazy. They had drunk 2 or 3 drinks, me nothing as I was driving them home. It had been a good night. We pulled into a lay-by to a late-night burger trailer that sat on a lay-by on the B1393, as we regularly had before. I think close to Bell Common, but certainly between Coppet Hill and North Weald Aerodrome. We had all parked near the start of the lay-by, the car bonnet facing the burger van, which we got out and walked towards. The other 3 had collected their orders and taken them back to the car. My order was taking a little longer, so I waited behind. When it was finally ready, I had walked back to the car. It was a Friday night, so the occasional car was passing, but it wasn't busy. The burger van was facing into the lay-by and the hedges surrounding the fields beyond, so he could have seen what happened next. As I walked slowly back to the car, trying not to drop my burger and cup of tea, I became aware that the other 3 in the car looked at me strangely. I squinted at them, trying to work out what they were doing. Then they started shouting at me to come back to the car and beckoned me. They got quite frantic, but still I couldn't work out why. Everything had gone weirdly quiet. There was no noise at all. I can remember hearing my breathing, like when you put your head under water in the bath. It felt like a hand or something on my shoulder, and I turned. I didn't see anything but blackness that surrounded me suddenly. I got the feeling or something old and musty smell. That's all I remember. The next thing I know, I was back behind. I was behind the back of my car, running back towards it. I had no idea how I got there, and I had moved about 30 meters from where I was. I could see my dropped burger and polystyrene teacup on the floor way ahead of me. As I got to the car, my body was shaking. I noticed that everything was back to normal. It was no longer quiet. The cars were going past again. The other three were screaming. I got into the car and drove away as quickly as I could. That's when we noticed that around 15 minutes had disappeared. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the night. We were all drained. But the next day, when we spoke about it, they told me that they had been shouting at me to get into the car, as there was a tall black shape moving closely towards me as I walked to the car. I cannot remember what happened next. They were just suddenly screaming, and I was running back. All these years, I still have no idea what happened that night. It still makes me cold to think about. Goodness. I wonder what it was. Does anyone have any ideas? It sounds like some sort of spectre, or it might have even been some sort of alien. I don't know. I have no idea. This is a crazy story, a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing it, Chris. And I hand it over to you guys. Tell me, what do you think happened to Chris? That's bizarre, truly bizarre. And on to our second story. We check the time. Oh, we've got 7 minutes in. And this is by Spirit in My Shadow, and Twitter handle Spirit in My Shad1. The story is called The Keyboard That Talked. I'm sure that everyone at some point in their lives has experienced true fear. A sort of fear that sinks deep into your bones and anchors you to the spot. A fear that leaves you an imprint upon your brain that never fades, no matter how hard you try to rationalize or forget it. This is my first face-to-face encounter with true fear at number 74. And my first major encounter with something truly horrific in a spiritual sense. Not too long ago, after the bones were found in the summer. Which bones are these? You'll have to tell us more about these bones. There was a time of tension in our home. My mother and stepfather were arguing a lot, and me and my sister were now in the habit of shutting ourselves away or playing on the estate to avoid the horrible atmosphere at home. It was a Saturday, and much to my dismay, I had been grounded for a reason I cannot recall. Whilst the rest of the children down the road were out basking in the few mild days before the chill set in. Lil included. Oops, there goes my phone. I better turn it off. Sorry about that. And they zipped around the. Sorry, I'll start that again. Sorry, Lil included, and they zipped around on bicycles and launched water balloons at one another in the street, screeching and shouting at each other as they tried to avoid getting drenched. True to form, my parents were at each other's throats, and as had become the custom, I had been banished to my bedroom, which suited me just fine, whilst they shouted insults at each other downstairs. I didn't have a television in my room, so I remember doodling in my diary for a short while before I grew bored and wondered what else to do with myself to drown out the noise. I went to Lil's room and took down a keyboard that she had stashed on the shelf of her built-in wardrobe. It wasn't anything fancy, but a simple keyboard that in truth was for children much younger than me, as the sound effects consisted of farm animals and the like. I was going through a bit of a phase where I wanted to learn music, so I thought I could improvise and set up the basic tune and I could practice. I took it to my little room, shut the door behind me, and made myself comfortable on the carpet, with my back against the cool radiator. I let my fingers dance across the keys freely, experimenting, finding the ones that would make the most satisfying tune. After settling on a simple melody that sounded right, I practiced it for a few more times before deciding I would record it and show it to my sister later on when she came home. I pressed the record button at the top left of the keyboard, and all at once my excitement was shattered by the sounds of the sound effects coming on at once. It was horrendous noise as they all played over each other in a cacophony of distorted, drawling animal calls. A few seconds of this unnerving noise, and I came to the conclusion that maybe the batteries were wearing out. I wondered if I had anything nearby with batteries I could swap in. Before I got a chance to act, the sound effects started to die down, fading a little into the background, but still looping over and over. A voice came through the speaker, the kind of gravelly, deep, guttural voice you hear in horror movies. It started bellowing out my name, far louder than the speakers were designed for. Amy, 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 over and over again. All the while, the oinks and moos and clucks and tractor noises played in the background like some sort of disturbed soundtrack to a hellscape. It wasn't like it was making a sound that could have been mistaken for my name. It was roaring it out clear as day. I screamed so hard my lungs hurt, and then screamed some more as that awful noise rose above mine, trying to drown me out. Amy! Amy! I tried to squirm backwards to get away, but the radiator stopped me. I tried frantically pushing the red off button, but it did absolutely nothing. I shoved it about a foot across the carpet to the middle of the room, and all the while hysterical as the object continued calling my name. Mum and Dad heard the voice, and then my terror from downstairs over their argument. They later told me that they thought a bloke had gotten into the house unnoticed somehow, or logic abandoned them as the chaos coming from above them threw them into panic. I remember Dad bursting through my door with Mum close behind, and the look on his face will stay with me until my last days. His eyes were bulging in shock I'll start again. His eyes were bulging in shock as he clocked where the voice was coming from. Staring at it for a few seconds as it continued to ring out, he looked lost, like he did not know how to deal with the situation. Then, in a panic reflex, he picked it up and smashed it against the floor as hard as he possibly could. The batteries flew out of it, and the casing that held the back together was dislodged. It didn't stop. Another 7 or 8 seconds passed by as it continued, before fading and stopping altogether. The entire house fell silent as we all stared at one another, open-mouthed, completely disturbed by what we just witnessed. Mum and Dad attempted to calm me down before Dad abruptly snatched it up and took it straight to the outside bin and threw it in there. My fear-induced shrieks had caused a bit of commotion outside, with a small group of kids and neighbours gathering near the front gate, wondering what the hell had happened. Years later, Dad, having always been sceptical and a practical man, told me that he'd been the one thing in his life that he could never explain. In his own words, "Yeah, that was effing weird. I cannot explain it, nor do I want to. It was just creepy." Even after witnessing what happened and hearing the voice with her own ears, Mum still never wanted to believe that there was anything paranormal going on in the house. I think it was a comfort thing. Just pretend it never happened and carry on as before. She would soon learn. Friends of mine had asked me a couple of weeks later what went down, and when I told a couple of them, they took the mick out of me. Cue voices of mock disbelief. "Ah, yeah, I'm sure. Your keyboard spoke to you, you nut job." They'd laugh at me. I never really lived that one down, and I soon learned to keep my mouth shut regarding anything freaky that went on in the house. I think that's why, to this day, although I am a trained clairvoyant, I never call myself that. There's a stigma around it, and it makes it an uncomfortable thing to admit. It's not that I'm ashamed, it's just that I'm not here to convince naysayers, as a few of them seem to believe, leading to heated debate. It's something that one has to experience to fully understand, and I respect that. Still not 100% sure who it was that day who tried in a very alarming way to get my attention. Safe to say I've never owned a keyboard, and I don't think I ever will, just in case. So thank you very much. What a wonderful story. I'm sorry I stumbled a few bits with the phone ringing and all that sort of stuff going on, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a wonderful weekend. I will see you again on Monday. Bye-bye.